Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast where we explore what's possible in the world of investing. If you've just joined us for the first time, a massive welcome to the community. My name is Bryce, and as always, today I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. We are loving our Ask an Advisor series where we get some of Australia's best financial advisors and we put your questions to them.
Yes.
And today in the room, we're joined by Dylan Pargiter-Green.
Almost.
Dylan
Pargiter-Green.
Pargiter-Green.
Bryce got it wrong the first podcast. You got it wrong the second podcast.
Damn it.
By number 3, we'll nail it. We'll nail it.
Well, Dylan PG is in the
DPG
is the director and advisor at Bold Wealth. And we've got a bunch of questions from the Equity Mates community, from our Facebook discussion group, and from our contact form on our website. That's how you can submit questions to a future episode of Ask an Advisor. But we're going to cover planning, we're going to cover tax, it's that time of year, cover investing, and retirement.
All good stuff.
Got your work cut out for you, Dylan.
Absolutely, man.
Yes.
No, that's a lot of content. I think we've only got half an hour. So.
We do, yes.
Yep.
Well, Dylan, before we kick into it, you are part of the advisors that if anyone at Equity Mates is looking for financial advice, you are one of a group that we recommend. Can you just give those that have just joined the show for the first time a bit of a brief intro into what you specifically do, I guess your specialties, your average client, for those that are potentially looking for an advisor?
Yeah, for sure. So, Bold Wealth is a company that I started a couple of years ago. We've got 3 directors, 3 advisors. We look after anyone through sort of mid to late stage accumulation all the way through to retirement and legacy planning. So there's lots of different things that happen throughout that journey, and I think we've touched on some of them before. We'll certainly touch on some of them again today, but our goal is to help people, set a goal that is something that they want to achieve in the future, and find the best financial method to get there. So whether or not that's building wealth in your accumulation phase and the most efficient ways to do that, or how do we, use that wealth when we've finally made the decision to start our decumulation or retirement, as is probably more commonly known. How do we then do that? And what are the things that are important to us along that journey, and how do we make the best decisions along the way? So,
well, if you are interested in speaking to one of our advisors, including Dylan, head to equitymates.com/advice, and there's a form there. But Ren, let's get stuck into it.
Let's do it. Now, Dylan, first question we have came from the community, but is also one that is close to my heart. I'm getting married at the end of the year, and the first question is about...
Prenup.
Is it about your wife?
Yeah, sure.
Should I do
Am I making the right decision?
Run!
These are all good questions, but no, the question is about philosophies when it comes to money for couples and setting up their finances. Everything shared, separate accounts, joint accounts, money on the side. What have you seen work? What have you seen not work? And how do you recommend clients set it up?
Okay, so what doesn't work is trying to hide stuff from each other. Please don't do that. Everybody in the community, if you're going down the path of wanting to be with the person that you want to be with forever, you're sort of making that decision we should be making that decision with pretty open arms and open finances as well. Really interestingly, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but everyone's different and what works for different people. Some people like to have their own wage go into their own account and then have a joint account where they just pay bills, and that might work for 30 years, 40 years of marriage or being together or whatever it might be. And other people just throw everything in all in the same place. 2 probably things that most commonly come up is, 1, there is a best financial outcome for you when you do it, and understanding what that is. So, if you've got a lot of debt, you holding your money in not the offset account or your wages going into something that's not that account is probably inefficient, even if that's not where you're holding most of your money for investment purposes. But if you're just sort of holding money on the side for no reason, you're missing out there. The other thing that comes up most of the time is people, when they're first entering that joint financial arrangement, it's a little bit like, oh, should we, shouldn't we? I don't know what I do. And I don't want to sound mean, but grow up. You're spending 50 grand on a wedding together. Like, surely if, someone wants to go out and spend $200 on a pair of jeans, like, it's okay that that's a shared account that money comes from, right? Like, you're sharing so many other things at that point that it shouldn't really matter anymore. So focus on the big stuff, focus on the actual investment, wealth generating, wealth decisions, and don't sweat the small stuff and grow up.
Yeah.
I think it can come unstuck in that instance where if someone's spending the 200 on the jeans, though, if one of the people in the couple feels like it's an unfair contribution to the joint or in sharing, that's where I think sometimes it can.
Oh, 100%. But also, like, how often is it that both people in the couple earn exactly the same amount of money?
Yeah, never. Yeah,
so, like, again, there's always going to be inequality. It doesn't matter whether you're at the very start and you're first joining in and splitting bills and things, or you're much later and one person's taken years off to have children or whatever it be. There's always going to be these inequalities.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about, okay, well, what's the best thing for us financially rather than what's the best thing for me as an individual.
Yeah. One thing that this is probably going to need personal advice, and I'm probably going to have to come and see you, but where we're at with my wife and I, we share pretty much everything. To your point, it's like we're in it together. Why not? Except we've just started on the investment side because that's something that I feel like we needed proper advice on around tax and structuring and planning later in life. She's going to probably go on maternity leave at some point. I'm probably hopefully become a billionaire. Like what's going to happen? So that's where I can see advice being really helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's exactly what I was saying, right? Think about the big decisions. Think about the big things that affect you both, right? Like tax payable for the household is tax payable. So if you can manage things in a way and set things up in a way that you overall pay a lower amount, your household has more money and therefore you can go and do more of those little enjoyable treat things without having to worry about it because you're better off. You've got more money.
Well, speaking of tax, we do have a couple of tax questions coming a little later, but let's stick on the theme of setting up your finances. And a common question we get is investing for kids and perhaps a little bit more specifically, education funding for kids. Seems like a lot of people in our audience are kind of getting to that stage of life. So how does it work? What are the options and how do you see clients fit it into existing investment plans they might have?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I think people fall apart with education funding is that it's a very long expense. So if you think about how much it costs to send a child to maybe the average private school, it's between $300,000 and $350,000 if you're going from
post-tax.
Yeah, after tax. That's right, after tax money.
So what does that work out to be, like $30,000 a year?
$30,000 a year, and that's not necessarily the top schools, but it's also
which is like $70,000 gross income.
Not quite.
$60,000, 50.
even still.
We'll go over tax brackets with Bryce after this.
No, as in just for that component, if that makes sense. Like after tax, you need on top of your.
Yeah, but it depends on your tax bracket, of course.
You know what I'm saying.
But look, if someone out there is earning $70,000 and only walking away with $30,000, go and see Dylan because you're set up poorly.
And lots of other people as well at the tax office and anyway, but that's only school fees. And people don't also realise that along that journey, you need to spend a lot more money. Extracurricular school activities cost a whole lot.
Camps, uniforms,
that's right.
Musical instruments.
Yeah, so even public schooling, the average cost of a child going through public schooling is between sort of $70,000 and $100,000 thereabouts. Because of all the extra stuff. So the actual school fees themselves are not that expensive. But for some people, like being able to fund those expenses without needing to think about them is a really important thing. So, it's a measure of planning. So making sure that you think about, okay, well, when my children are born, a lot of people are putting them on waiting lists for these schools and making sure that they get into the school that they went to, which is a wonderful thing. But then when it gets to year 1 or year 7 or whenever it is that you've decided to put your kids through school, you don't necessarily just have that money there. And all of a sudden you're getting a $30,000 bill a year that you didn't previously have. Now, that's wonderful if you can just fork that out, but it's a lot nicer if you don't have to. And so it is that concept of do the little things early, put some money away at the start, but then regularly put some money away into a vehicle that is an efficient way of saving. So we use investment bonds and education bonds a lot for this. And the reason being that because you have a known future outcome that you're seeking, you can very easily model out a known future drawdown, much like, say, superannuation can. The underlying investments can sit in, 10-year plus planning investments. So you can have high growth investments. You don't have to be too worried about volatility. And then you can, reduce your risk allocation as you get to the point where you need to actually pay for these. But most of the time, you're taking that $450,000 school fee and either, putting about half of that away over 10 years before they go to school, or putting sort of 2/3 to 3/4 away, but getting your money back at the end. And that's how I like to plan for it. I sort of say, cool, well, if you want to send your kid to 6 years of high school and 3 years of university, wouldn't it be wonderful if you had, saved up $500,000 over the next 18 years, and I gave you $500,000 at the end?
Did you hear Scott Galloway talk about this?
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty interesting point.
Yeah, it's like, you know that you're going to spend money on it.
Yeah.
So...
Hold on. For people who are now on the edge of their seats, what was the point?
So he wasn't. He just came out and said, like, I see a lot of people get so stressed about sending their kids to private school, and inherently the reason they want to do it is because they feel like it's going to give their kid a more secure future when they finish. And his point was, if you just put money aside for their entire school life and sent them to a public school, and then at the end gave them $500,000 portfolio, you've given your kid a pretty secure future.
Or a massive schoolies.
That would be quite a school.
Obviously, there's a lot of intangible things that go with private schools and whatnot, but that was kind of his point. He's like, if the end goal is security, you could flip it and think about it.
Well,
differently.
this is another thing that we talk about, right? So a lot of parents will want to, give their kids a deposit for a house or plan for something like a gift at 21 or 25 to give them that as well. This is a really wonderful way to set that up, build that over a journey of schooling and whatever it is. But then that remaining amount, that's just your savings that you would have given them anyway. With an investment bond, after 10 years, you can transfer that beneficial ownership, no capital gains event. The withdrawal of it is capital gains free, so all your investment earnings over that time is capital gains treated. It's a wonderful way to plan for not only education, but then if you are planning on giving your house deposit, which by the time 18 years from now is probably going to be $500,000. I mean, it almost is that now. It's a wonderful 2-win strategy in a lot of cases.
So one question I always have when it comes to education bonds is... let's say you go in with the intention of paying for a kid's education and then you decide, I'm not going to worry about that public school instead. You then get all the tax benefits still, even without spending it for that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hold on, if I take that example a step further, if I just say I'm saving up for my kid's education, but secretly I'm not, you just get all the tax benefits anyway?
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to use these for education.
So it's great. So why don't more people use them?
Well,
why aren't we using them now?
Capital growth?
Well, I mean,
because you can invest in whatever you want.
Yeah, like a lot of our clients will just have like a Vanguard high growth underlying.
Oh, it's just a wrapper.
It's just a tax structure. So
why aren't we doing?
Because the reason
Should we turn
is
the
because
mics
you
off?
don't. No. These are totally legal. We set them up for people who are saving for themselves as well.
Yeah.
But there is a lot more discipline that's built into them. So let's say, for example, you put a $10,000 starting balance in, right? Now, in that first year, you can contribute as much as you like. So $10,000, and maybe you put $500 a month away, so $16,000. The following year, you can only contribute up to 125% of what you've done the previous year. So let's say my plan is to contribute $500 a month over that time. Second year, we only contribute $6,000. That means the following year, the most we can do is 125% of that $6,000. Now, if you don't contribute in a year, you can't contribute anymore.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Well, if you don't contribute the full 125, or
No, just anything. Yeah. So if you go down to 2,000, that means the following year, the most you can contribute is 125% of 2,000. So the reason that they're not useful as used for everyone is because you need to have a very strict.
But if you're just dollar cost
To be
averaging-
honest, this isn't turning me off it. This
Yeah.
is turning me on it.
Yeah, I mean that's it. And for we will use them not only for education purposes. We'll certainly use them for people that have future outcomes. Like early retirement is a wonderful reason to use one.
Like, why isn't everyone in the FIRE community talking about these?
Well, maybe they don't know about them. They've only relatively recently come back on trend.
Okay.
How do we set them up?
So there's a number of different providers that you can use. Feel free to reach out. Try not to mention products specifically on the podcast, but yeah, feel free to reach out, understand it. It's much like opening an account with someone. The thing I would stress with that is because there are a lot more rules around it, and there's penalties for withdrawing the money early. So that's the other thing. You might be 6 years into something, and then all of a sudden you've got this big unpaid tax if you need to pull that money out. So unlike an investment, which your opportunity cost of not using a bond is probably the fact that you have to lock that money away for a certain period of time to get that tax benefit. That also said, you don't actually end up paying more tax than what you would have. You just pay the difference. Yeah. So, yeah, it gets complicated. It's worth seeking advice on, I think, if you want to do it, is the answer.
Interesting.
But yeah, look, funding education, it's a known future cost. Future gifting, it's a known future intention. And you can gift, effectively, you can gift a lot less and give a lot more by saving.
Yeah. Nice. Plenty to think about.
Yeah.
Now, mentioning tax, we've got a couple of tax questions, but I think, I guess to kind of encapsulate a number that had come through, it's around when to know if it's a good time to start thinking about tax-effective strategies. Is it...
When's it not a good time?
Well, I mean, like, people would be looking at, like,
Sorry, you're meant to say that.
superannuation, do I need, like, is income thresholds, all of that sort of stuff. It's, when is the right time to start thinking about tax-effective strategies?
So, again, a bit of a cop-out answer, but it really depends on your goals. So, very common tax-effective strategy might be additional super contributions. If you're not already maxing your cap, super contributions could be a really good way of doing that. Now, if you're in your late 20s or early 20s and you want to save for your house, putting extra money into superannuation, as tax beneficial as it is going to hinder your ability to do the thing that is most important to you. And so that's where we have the decision tree. It's like, get the benefit of tax now, but probably then lose the benefit of getting into the property market later.
There is a confusing nuance to that example with the first home super savers scheme where you use super to save for a house. So excluding that from this example.
Excluding that, it's personally something that I know works for some people as well. It's not something that I believe has a significant amount of value as what the government necessarily intended it to.
Okay, that's interesting.
Like, it's great, but if the difference between you buying a house and not buying a house is $3,000 or $4,000, then, and you're stretching yourself that far, and that's the tax benefit you're getting, and you're potentially exposing yourself to volatility within superannuation along that way, if you don't set it up properly, you probably shouldn't be buying as expensive a house.
Yeah,
So,
I'd never thought of it like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there is a benefit, 100%. Black and white, there's a tax benefit to it. But you have to be in a very specific tax bracket to achieve it, or middle tax bracket to get the massive benefit of it. The work that goes into it is a lot. I would just argue that think about what you're doing with buying that house, and perhaps don't stretch yourself so far that you then end up in a high interest rate environment like we're in now, and under stress and under
Yeah.
under duress. So,
Very cool.
So I think if we summarize it, it comes back to goals and understanding what your main priority is at the time. If you are saving towards, retirement, or you're saving towards a early retirement or a specific goal, and you've secured the sort of key assets in your life, so you've got a house, you're managing your debt, you don't necessarily need to pay that debt off all immediately and fast and all those sorts of things, that's at the time when you can start doing the tax effective stuff. But of course, most opportunities to use tax efficient strategies have an alternative where you lose access to the money for a period of time, so superannuation or investment bonds or something like that. So you need to think about your priorities and what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Dylan, we've got a number of more questions to get to. We've got questions on leveraged ETFs, on investing in stocks versus your offset, and plenty more. But we're going to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to Equity Mates. We're doing an Ask an Advisor episode. We've got Dylan Pargiter-Green, a financial advisor and director at Bold Wealth, in the studio with us. We've covered setting up your finance, investing for your kids' education, a tax question, but let's get to investing. This is a question we get every now and then around leveraged ETFs. The two big ones in Australia are the BetaShares ones, GEAR and GGUS, but there are more and more leveraged ETFs coming to market. Everyone's financial circumstances are different, but generally, what are your thoughts on leveraged ETFs and leverage?
Yeah, I mean, we love leverage as a tool to amplify returns. I'm relatively young. I have leveraged positions in my portfolio, but I don't have 100% of my money in there, right? Like, it's all relative and it's all risk allocated. And if we look at the most common use of leverage, it's property. So property is a wonderful asset and has incredible performance from an investment point of view, often because of the fact that you only need 20% of the total value, but you make 100% of the return on your deposit. Using the leverage funds, the leverage ETFs, similar, you obviously don't have that same degree of 4 times leverage, so 400%, but you do amplify what the market does. And I totally believe that if you can have 10 or 20% of a portfolio in something when you are in your 20s, that if you're just buying these market-weighted ETFs and it's replicating that, but with an amplified version, you can ride out the volatility. The most important thing that I talk about with people like this is you're going to have a negative 40% year if you hold it for long enough, a negative 50% even. The bounce back from that is going to be 70 or 80% positive. So you just need to not panic and sell at those times. And you shouldn't be putting money into those if you are planning on using that money at all for anything other than just leaving it there for at least 7 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it plays a good part. It allows you to get an amplification of a particular market. It's just not something that, it's an amplification both ways. So it can go the other way.
Yeah.
Whether or not when the S&P and the NASDAQ are at record highs, I'd be putting money into geared stuff. I don't know. It's obviously a personal choice, but it's definitely got its benefits in long-term investing.
Yeah. I find it fascinating, the psychology of how people are willing to gear themselves in property versus other assets, and I get it.
It's like a social acceptance thing.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's like it's all well and good to try and get as much debt as possible on a home loan, but then $100,000 in stock. It's like,
but it's also
what are you doing?
If you think about like government incentives, like more and more, it's like, oh, we'll co-invest with you, so you only need 5% deposit, or if you're in this category, you even need less. Like the government are even like, hey, we're going to let you leverage
as
just
much as possible.
Amounts.
But that also, I mean, the government's just creating inflation in the property market by a lot of these policies. The renovators scheme, we'll give you $25,000. What happens?
Yeah.
Build cost goes up by $25,000.
Yeah.
It's not like you actually get that benefit.
Yeah.
It's just everything gets more expensive. And it's similar. The more people you drive into a particular segment of a market, although it is positive for that, as a broader economic position when we're already experiencing high inflation, it's perhaps short-term focused. Anyway.
Anyway, we're not here to make policy. We're here to do the best within whatever policy constraints we're given.
That leverage thing, though, you're right. People go really heavy into property and leverage. There is an argument that property is very unlikely to fall by as dramatic a volume as a market at any given point.
Yeah, but if you look at what period you're taking a mortgage for, theoretically it's 30-year period.
Yeah.
If you look at the market, there is no 5-year period where it hasn't gone up.
Yeah.
So over 30 years.
You mean the stock market?
The stock market, yeah. Like if you take the same 30-year time horizon with the stock market, like the risk profile becomes very similar.
Yeah. And
it's not better than
it's a
property,
liquidity thing.
No 5-year period?
Yeah, no 5-year period. Yeah.
Jeez, that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, give or take.
Definitely. I think if you looked in the years from like 2004 to 2008, the end of that period would be down. Yeah. But of course,
we'll fact check ourselves on the fly here. There's certainly a stat like that.
I think the point of what you're saying though is 100% right, which is that if you are willing to hold something for 30 years, like you are property and paying it off and things, the cost of doing this with a market-weighted index, yes, you are going to pay a little bit more for that gearing. You're going to cop the cost of internal leverage and things like that. But probably you will end up ahead. It's just a matter of not overdoing it so that if a GFC event comes across, you don't end up so far behind on the basis of that leverage. And that's where property's unlikely, unless you're US ninja loans, and you own a lot of untenanted houses in Florida.
I think the other key thing to point out on leverage as well, property versus stock market, is up until recent years, the way that the products available to leverage in the stock market were very different to how you would leverage in property.
Synthetic leverage with options.
Or margin calls and...
Yeah.
bits and
sorry,
pieces.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it's not that just like same repayment every month and you kind of commit. You can get in a lot of trouble. But luckily there are products now and ETFs that are set up. And
they don't cost the 2.5-3% that it used to cost 10 years ago to buy a fund that had leverage or gearing in it. So, they're available in there.
So let's stick on the investing theme. A very common question we get that does depend on people's personal circumstances. Again, you might be seeing a theme here, but tell us, I guess, how you would think through it. And this is relevant for both Bryce and I because it's a decision we face. Offset account v investing. People's mortgages these days probably have a 6 in front of them. The long-term average of the stock market is, 8 to 10%, but you got to pay tax on that. So how do you think about the choice between putting more in your offset or investing in the stock market?
It comes down to your goals, like you said, right? I'm a financial advisor and I like goals. But when we look at this, it is about what your future outcome that's sought is. And yes, on a very black and white level, your 6.25% after tax is a very attractive return. And for a lot of people, that is actually a really good way to save money and feel secure at the moment whilst those rates are high. A couple of things that people don't necessarily realise all the time when we're talking about percentage rates on offset accounts. That percentage rate and the amount that you have in your offset, it reduces the interest payment and increases the principal payment. So you're not paid the 6.25% on whatever you've got in your offset. It just comes off your debt. Now, in some cases, that might be available as redraw, but not a lot of people are taking that money out of their redraw and going and spending it in the same way that you might have that investment. The other thing is that with your house, it has a limited capacity to compound. What I mean by that is that once it's paid off, the only benefit that you then have of not having a mortgage is the cash flow that you would otherwise be allocating to that mortgage. Now, we use debt recycling a lot for clients where we take out additional equity and then we recycle the income from that back through the debt to help pay down or effectively build a portfolio of assets that is greater than what the value of the mortgage is and pay it off faster. And the reason that that's a good strategy is because you can use debt on your house that isn't tax deductible, turn it into tax deductible debt. And so your effective interest rate now is comparable to your effective rate of return after tax.
How soon into your property journey can you start looking at debt recycling?
Well, there's a couple of
Asking
things.
for a friend.
Asking for a friend. So one would be, depends how much money you've got in the bank,
Yeah.
or in investments. So theoretically, you could take everything that you have in the bank and you could pay down your mortgage, and then the next day you could go and take out a new loan and you could invest that.
And then, okay.
But suppose that you don't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in the bank.
Well, then it's a case of at what stage do you have the equity available in your property? We generally won't do it for people unless they have sort of $100,000 plus, or they have existing investments with us.
Okay, so it's not about like the percentage of the mortgage you've paid off. It's more about like a hard number of like 100,000 plus.
Well, that's because it costs money to set it up. It costs money to maintain it, and we generally won't do it unless it's going to be valuable for the
And
client.
you want to be generating enough decent income from the investment to meaningfully contribute?
That's right. And so in the same way that with a, say, 30-year mortgage, where obviously you pay a lot more interest up front, and then when you get to the later stages of that mortgage, you're paying a lot more principal off. Well, your initial stages of compounding, you're probably saving more into your investment than you are earning money from that investment.
Yeah.
But fast forward 10 years, that investment's probably earning at a faster rate than what you're even able to save in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the amount that's then effectively paying off your home loan. And so it gets, as I say, it gets fairly complicated fairly quickly, but at 8 to 10% compounded, and particularly if you can use, if you're thinking about aiming to pay off debt at retirement, so you can use high capital growth assets and then draw them down in a lower or no tax environment, there's a real benefit of maintaining a mortgage that's tax effective throughout your working years and then drawing on tax effective investments when you get there.
Just because I know that we just used a heap of jargon, heaps of numbers, and it is easy to get lost in that. I think the takeaway for people is if you've got a few $100,000 of equity in your home, you should go to equitymates.com/advice, put your details in, and we'll put you in touch with one of our recommended advisors for a no-cost, no-obligation initial meeting, and you can get them to step through what debt recycling is in a little bit more detail and ask some more questions, because I hadn't really heard about it until we started getting questions on the podcast about it a couple of years ago. But you start to do the maths, and it's seriously powerful. I mean, so much of like getting ahead in your personal finances in Australia is figuring out where the tax not loopholes, but the tax opportunities are.
Yeah.
And this one for me is just like a massive free kick to existing property owners. But you know what? If you're an existing property owner, I don't begrudge you for using it. Like until some of these things change, do you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the tax system is designed to charge people the exact right amount of tax based on their circumstances. Nobody's out there, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who are trying to dodge tax, but use what you have to your advantage. So take your position and make the best possible decisions, whether that be with investing or with tax or with, saving for education or whatever it might be. But everything with planning and everything that we're talking about, it's all about figuring out what your best outcome is and then doing that with the things that you already have.
Well, Dylan, to close out today, we want one question around preparing for retirement. So for people at that stage in life looking to engage a planner, they haven't seen one before, what's involved, and I think what are the easy wins that you would sit down and kind of say, bang, let's just get this done?
Yeah. So first stage, you have to go to equitymates.com. /advice. No, look, the first thing that we do with all of our clients pre-retirement when we're doing that planning is understanding what their income need is and what the things that they actually want to keep. So, you know what? If at the moment you buy a new car every 3 years and that's something that's really important to you, you probably want to be able to continue doing that in retirement. And that's a cost. Having a car lease or leasing a car is a cost, those sorts of things. If you want to upgrade the house, those are decisions that you're going to have to accommodate for. So getting a real understanding of how much you need on a daily basis or a monthly or yearly basis to live off, and then also what are your sort of key milestones that you want to have. once we have that in mind and work through that with people, we start talking about their assets, I guess, be through superannuation wealth. It could be by downsizing the house and realising a lump sum and doing something with that. It is about that getting serious and getting deep on what are the things that I do now whilst I'm working that I really love and I don't want to give up, and how much do those things cost me. There's some really good numbers on the Australian Superannuation Funds Association website, so ASFA. They talk about a modest and a comfortable retirement. Within a modest retirement, you don't get to go overseas. Within a comfortable retirement, you might get to go overseas once in every 6 years. For most of our clients, we plan an overseas holiday on top of that. And we plan for, a new car more frequently. And we plan for more things in our life that we are actually accustomed to whilst we're earning. And we definitely want to be able to continue to enjoy those things. So that session with an advisor is really cool. What do you want from what you have, and is it possible, and how long is it going to last? And planning that out, the differences that it can make with putting money that you have now into the appropriate structure, like an account-based pension, 0% tax, up to $1.9 million. You can draw down tax-free income for the rest of your life if you're retired after 60. How good's that?
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Why would you hold your money in personal investments if you don't have that amount of money in superannuation?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That is an easy win. Even if you feel like you're too old and you've missed the boat, never too old to set things up for retirement.
Never.
Just listening to you talk about that answer, one thing that it made me think, we've recently done a couple of series on superannuation, and a really common question we got back was, I feel like I've left it too late. Like I'm in my 40s or I'm in my 50s. The balance totals that you were talking about feel like they're unrealistic to me. Have I just screwed this up? So I'm sure you get people coming through your door with similar questions. So how do you approach that?
It's never too late to start. You can always start earlier. But if you're feeling like that, it means probably you should start now, because you're only going to feel more like that 10 years from now when you haven't done anything about maybe feeling like you've started later. A lot of people as well don't realise that the numbers that are reported, whether it's $1.5 or $2 million or whatever it is, it's way too much.
Yeah.
The average spend in retirement is what those ASFA standards is made up of. And we tend to spend quite a lot in our early few years of retirement. We'll go on a big holiday, we'll do some renovations around the house, we'll do a few splash things. But as we get older, we do less and we spend less.
Yeah.
Like significantly. It drops off amazingly quickly.
So if the 1.5 or 2 million number is too much, like ballpark, obviously everyone's different, but like, is there a number that you think we should be keeping in mind?
Honestly, there's not. Like, I wish there was.
Because like the Australian Superannuation Funds Association, they talk about like $690K for a couple, and like and five
for
something.
Comfortable.
Yeah, is are those numbers more realistic?
Yeah, look, I mean, 690. If you think about drawing down sort of between 5 and 6% of your balance and living for 30 years beyond retirement, although that's probably a bit longer than life expectancy, that's probably going to get you there, but you are going to be somewhat dependent on the age pension as well. Yeah. And so it depends. Some people really don't want that. Some people want to get that dollar pension, so they get their seniors card and their healthcare card and they get cheap movie tickets. Yeah. And it's almost like I want to have less money so I can say stuff you to having to pay tax on my life. But the more you have, the better, obviously, because the decisions that you make are much more flexible then, and you're not reliant on thinking forward by 20 years and then you go, okay, well, if I draw that extra $20,000 out of my 690 that I have, that will, maybe mean that I don't have 3 more years worth of income later on, and I have to sacrifice something later on. So I personally think that probably for a couple, 1 to 1.2 is that comfortable standard, realistically, and then to actually be able to do things that are enjoyable, perhaps help your kids out, do some of the things that are very commonly important to our clients, it's a bit more. So, yeah, I mean, look, if you're in your 40s, you've got a long investment horizon left for superannuation. It's certainly not too late.
Well, that's good. A good positive note to finish on, I think. And if you are in that feeling a bit anxious, then hopefully Dylan's words there were able to help. But Dylan, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. If you'd like to submit to our next Ask an Advisor, head to equitymates.com/contact. If you'd like to speak directly with Dylan or any of our other advisors, head to equitymates.com/advice. There's a form there to fill in with some information, and we'll make sure that we connect you. Dylan's been doing some great work with some of the Equity Mates community
It's been
already.
awesome.
So we thank you for that. And if you're listening and feel like you want to get some professional advice, then Dylan and the team are here to help. But thank you so much, Dylan.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming down to Melbourne.
Yeah,
recording in the home studio.
It's a bit cold. Bryce is staying for the weekend to watch the Bombers lose.
Let's go, Bombers.
He's having a better year than he has for the last 20 years.
I'm feeling good. I
don't want to talk about the football anyway.
Well, Dylan, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.